The change in screen is visible, right?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. So basically, Supreme Court has, like Sandeep pointed out, finally gave a decision on this matter in terms of what it believes. So I'm not going to go too deep into the case law itself because I understand that most of us are familiar with that. And I'm just going to quickly brief through the key principles I believe come out from this case law, and then look at some issues and how these principles could be applied there. So in summary, the Supreme Court adjudicated, or the question of law before it was whether payments made by resident user or distributors to the non-resident supplier or manufacturer of the software can be categorized as royalty under Section 91 subclause 6, and whether it's liable to TDS under Section 195. The Supreme Court held that the amount paid cannot be characterized as royalty under Article 12 of the DTA. The words in bold which I have highlighted is to lay the emphasis that categorically the Supreme Court has given the position of no royalty characterization for software payments under the treaty. But it has, during the discussion, laid down certain principles which would influence the position under the domestic law also. During the course of this discussion, besides the learnings or principles emerging from the decision, we will cover some of the transactions and whether the amendment in 2012, how that would play because of the decision, cover certain domestic transactions and some of the new business models of SaaS, PaaS, and some associated issues on digital transactions. The first categorical principle Supreme Court has laid down is DTA should be considered to understand chargeability. And it goes on to say that in section 4 and 5, it connects to the rest of the provisions of the Act by saying it's subject to the provisions of the Act. So chargeability under the domestic law needs to necessarily consider the rights provided to a country under the double tax avoidance agreement. Second is that when a resident is making a payment to a non-resident who is eligible to claim treaty benefit, the TDS provisions under section 195 would be subject to the test of chargeability. So this is something which is, has been a matter of debate in the sense that there have been a few courts or on ground, at least the officers saying that 195 deduction has to be applied irrespective of whether the income is chargeable to tax or not. And in order to determine chargeability, the role of the double tax avoidance agreement. So these two principles understood together settles the law that even when we are looking at deduction of tax under 195, we do need to consider the rights of the non-resident under the double tax avoidance agreement. There is a particular issue which was in terms of the Supreme Court's decision in the Pilcom case. In this case, the Supreme Court differentiated itself from that decision, saying that that was in the context of section 194E, which are similar to sections 193 and 194, where the deductions are made with reference to the payments and not with reference to the chargeability. There are a few anomalies in this aspect, which I'm not going to deliberate too much in today's session. I think the settled law is that the test of chargeability is relevant when we are applying section 195. Now just moving further from chargeability to the definition of royalty. Under the treaty, the definition of royalty is exhaustive. And I think one very important principle which emerges from this decision is the meaning which needs to be attributed to the phrase in respect of. And it actually says that it is equivalent to attributable. The reason why it says it's exhaustive is because it uses the expression mean. And the term royalties refer to payments of any kind received as consideration for use of or right to use any copyright. The Supreme Court differentiates the domestic law definition of royalty by saying it's wider than the typical clauses available in the treaty on 3 counts. One is it refers to the lump sum consideration, which are not chargeable to tax under capital gains. It speaks of transfer of all or any rights. And thirdly, it says it must be in respect of any copyright. Now here, though the definition under the domestic law is wider, Supreme Court goes on to analyze it and states that when you look at applying the principles of rights in the context of a copyright, in the net result would be that the definition of royalties under the domestic law and the treaty are at par. Moving on, very important part of the case law, and hours can be spent understanding this. I'll keep it very brief, but the meaning of copyright has to be understood by referring to the Copyright Act, and licenses have to be understood as per Section 30 of the Copyright Act. So it goes on, the meaning of copyright under the Copyright Act, Section 14, defines it to mean an exclusive right. It goes on to state, what are those rights which are covered under copyright. I think the very important part is this part in the case of a computer program that decides to do any of the acts specified in clause A. There's an additional right which is provided in the context of computer program, which is to sell or give on commercial rental or offer for sale or for commercial rental any copy of the copyright program. We will discuss the phrase which has been deleted and how the Supreme Court refers to it to explain the doctrine of first sale and how that is relevant for characterizing a sale of a shrink wrap software as good and not as a right in the copyright. So one of the very important, and I think this will be a little repetitive in the next few slides and probably through this presentation, that the emphasis of the Supreme Court throughout the analysis has been on the fact that the right or interest has to be in the software. So even the right to reproduce the software is not granted and is expressly prohibited. The Supreme Court draws comparison to selling of books vis-a-vis via a distributor versus selling of books to a publisher for reproduction. So when an author allows a publisher to publish his book and reproduce multiple copies, he's giving him a right to reproduce the copyright he owns, and therefore it qualifies as a royalty. However, a distributor who picks those books from the publisher and resells it does not have a right in the copyright. He cannot technically reproduce, from a legal compliance perspective, he cannot reproduce those books. I'm sure all of us are aware that, legally speaking, even photocopying a book and reselling it as a second-hand photocopied book is a violation of copyright law. And it draws quite an emphasis on these principles to say that even in the context of software, we need to focus on the right in the copyright which protects the software. A few important statements I have removed from the Supreme Court's conclusions, just which will help us when we go into some of the case studies or issues on how the law should be interpreted. Copyright is an exclusive right. It restricts others from doing certain acts. It is an intangible, incorporeal right independent of material substance. Ownership of a copyright is different from the ownership of the material in which the copyright is embedded. Parting with copyright means parting as per Section 14, which is those 7 actions plus the 2 actions plus the action on being able to sell or the doctrine of first sale. A license which does not confer any proprietary interest to the licensee is different from the license as defined under Section 30 of the Copyright Act. Again, here the emphasis being that a license as defined under Section 30 of the Copyright Act would mean that there is an interest or a right which is granted in the copyright. So it entails a transfer of the rights envisaged under the copyright. Authorization to use licensed software with no exclusive rights in the software is not an infringement, even in case of customized software. So here the Supreme Court has illustrated and explained that, even in transactions where a particular software has been used and around that software, another development work has happened. As far as that is not a derivative.
ಇದು ಮಾಡಿ ಪಾರ್ಟಿಸಿಪೆಂಟ್ಸ್ Q&A chat ಅಂತ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ಅದು ಬ್ಲರ್ ಆಗಿದೆಯಾ ನೋಡು ನನಗೆ. ನಾನೊಂದು ಫೋಟೋ ಕಳಿಸ್ತೀನಿ, ನನಗೆ ಆ ಚಾಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದು ಏನೋ ಅದೇ ಚಾಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದು ಏನೋ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ, ಓದಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಈಗಲೇ ಕಳಿಸ್ತೀನಿ.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just explaining the concept of the customized software. where let's say that we would like to use the third-party software. On top of it, put a layer of software or customize it for a specific benefit or feature. Now, what is very important here to know is that when the customization is happening, are we actually having the right to amend the underlying software and make it a reproducible item, which I can thereafter provide to others? Then it could qualify as a royalty. But in most cases of customized software, the source code of the underlying software it stays intact, and there's a layer of customization which is built on top of that. And I think it is in that context that we need to relate to why even payments for customized software would not qualify as royalty. Right to reproduce the software is different from right to use the software. Now coming to the doctrine of first sale or principle of exhaustion. So here basically what the Supreme Court in very simple words, and I'm trying to avoid the legal terminologies here, just for us to visualize this. What the Supreme Court has said is that when you sort of transfer a tangible product, so let's say if you're selling a chair to another person, once you have sold the chair, the other person is the owner of that chair. And implicitly after that, it's the person who has acquired the chair, he can do whatever he wants with it. So the question was whether this principle applies in the context of software. And the Supreme Court said, yes, it does apply, especially in the context of shrink wrap software. Because what it amounts to, when you sell a copy of the software, you're transferring the right of ownership of the copy, which means that the particular, it's easier to visualize in a CD that if there were 10 CDs which were loaded with that software and you sold one CD, the second person gets the ownership of that CD, but it doesn't mean that he's got the ownership or a right in the copyright. So this is a very important principle which continues to emphasize the need to differentiate a copyrighted article from the copyright itself. Again, this is something I thought I personally found the decision very comprehensive in the way they went about analyzing the agreement, and this principle which emerges from it, that the real nature of the transaction must be looked at upon reading the agreement as a whole. So what the Supreme Court did was it looked at the end user license agreement. For example, there are passing references to comments such as the use of the word license in an end user license agreement. It looked at all the 4 categories of business transaction models which typically occur in the context of shrink wrap software. So category 1 is where a foreign license holder or manufacturer directly enters into an end user license agreement. The second is where the foreign manufacturer appoints Indian distributors, and then you can have layers in it. And category the principle really comes back to whether in any of those scenarios the end user received a right in the copyright. So from an end user standpoint, even in the direct sale where you have EULA, the fact is that the license is not in terms of Section 30. It merely allows you the right to use the copy of that software, but does not provide you a right to do any further actions with it. The Supreme Court rejected the argument of the revenue that some of the EULA terms
Yes,
Bharat,
you're audible. You have to share your screen.
Yeah, I think there was just a drop in the call.
Yeah.
Vishnu, please share your screen, Vishnu.
Yeah. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Vishnu, please proceed.
Yeah. So from a distributor standpoint, that the distributor has no right to sublicense or reproduce or reverse engineer the software. He is basically like any other distributor of an hardware and makes a profit on such resale. So this is again very, I think the Supreme Court has been very clear in its communication as to why it believes that none of these transactions qualify as a right in the copyright. In the context of embedded software, the Supreme Court goes on to say, what is licensed by the foreign supplier to the distributor and resold to the resident end user is in fact a sale of a physical object which contains the embedded computer program and is therefore a sale of goods. And it goes on to rely on the law which has been declared in the Supreme Court decision in Tata Consultancy. Another amendment which I think will be very relevant in the context of retrospective amendments. So it is laid down the law to state that retrospective amendments are not enforceable for TDS obligations, since the law cannot expect the person to do the impossible. At times when I read some of these principles, I believe, wasn't this obvious? But I think, yes, law is what law says, and our authorities enforce it in a manner at times which makes us question some basic principles there. So pre-2012, the Supreme Court has categorically laid down the law that since that law did not exist pre-2012, any TDS obligations prior to 2012 cannot refer to the amended or expanded definitions provided in explanation 4. So these were some of the principles. I'll just pause for maybe a couple of seconds if there are any comments or questions, and I'll go into whether the position is really settled and what kind of issues, in my view, are yet open. Bharat, is there any comment or question, or can I proceed?
Nothing as of now, Vishnu. Please proceed.
Sure. So now let's go into looking at whether after the Supreme Court's decision and principles which it has outlined, what could be the applicability of explanation 4. So explanation 4, which was introduced by Finance Act 2012, says that transfer of all or any rights in respect of any right, in respect of, sorry about the typo there, in respect of any right, property or information includes and has always included transfer of all or any right for use or right to use a computer software, including granting of a license, irrespective of the medium through which such right is transferred. Now, if we go into the Act and look at explanation 4, while the royalty definition has been provided in the context of in explanation 2, these amendments were brought in again as explanations. Now, explanation 4 says, for the removal of doubt, it's hereby clarified that the transfer of all or any right. Now, the phrase transfer of all or any right in explanation 2 is again in the context of a patent, invention, or a copyright. I mean, I'm not going to the detailed phrases there, but it has drawn the nexus to those subclauses where it refers back to a patent, an invention, or a copyright in a literary, artistic, or scientific work. Now, after explanation 4 came in, most of us, especially after the Samsung decision, have had to accept, at least in the state of Karnataka, that the law is settled that payment for computer software would qualify as royalty. And one of the challenges in interpretation comes by the use of the word right for use or right to use. Since the taxpayer was arguing that the payment needs to be for the right in the copyright, this amendment appeared on the face of it to negate that interpretation and say that even if you are making a payment to use a computer software, it would qualify as a royalty. In my view, even after explanation 4, and particularly after the Supreme Court's decision, there are very strong grounds to take the view that even now the rights which we are referring to have to be in the context of a
Vishnu, you're becoming less audible, Vishnu.
Is this better?
No, it's very low.
Bharat, is this fine?
This is first.
Yeah. So in the explanation 4, the phrase in respect of right for use or right to use a computer software, irrespective of the medium through which such right is transferred. So how do we refer or understand the meaning of such right? Because these rights are really protected by the copyright. So is there merit in saying that the phrase such right should be read as the copyright? Further, to look at the phrase right for use or right to use. Is it right for using an article, or is it right for using the copyright itself? And again, if we say that the interpretation has to be understood as right for using a copyright or right to use a copyright, then typical payments for shrink wrap softwares would not qualify as royalty. I strongly believe that in the case where treaties, where the non-residents are eligible to take the treaty benefit, the position of not royalty because of the Supreme Court's decision is intact. But even in the context of the domestic law, we could take the view that even in spite of explanation 4, such payments should not qualify as royalty. As usual, the position will not be free from litigation, but this is what my view on this is. Just to elaborate this with another perspective in the explanation 4. So in explanation 2, subclause 1, it says the transfer of all or any rights, including the granting of a license in respect of a patent, invention, model, design, secret formula or process or trademark or similar property. So one of it, at least at the first level, we have seen a few assessing officers say that while they have argued that computer software is a copyright, they have also laid arguments to say that what you're paying for is to use the process which is underlying that software, or at times if it's a startup which has created some kind of a new technology, it says that it's an invention. Now let's look at whether the payment which a customer makes is really for the patent, invention or the process. In my view, it's not for either of these. It's really towards the promised outcome of the feature or functionality. If we go towards giving the meaning of in respect of a very wide meaning, then purchase of a tangible product could also be construed as a royalty. So if we are purchasing a mobile phone, even that has an underlying manufacturing process that also uses softwares, that also has a brand. But when we purchase the product, we don't interpret the phrase in respect of, or we don't say that that consideration is attributable to the underlying manufacturing process, patent or trademark. Interpretation should be provided in a harmonious manner between a transaction involving digital or tangible goods. And the Supreme Court themselves have laid down the law to say that the medium cannot determine the characterization. So here again, reliance can be placed on the Supreme Court decision to state that it is not royalty, and also treaty protections are available. What mischief which I believe exists in the law is when we look at explanation 5. Though explanation 5 was introduced in the context of the Asia satellite decision, but it has been worded very broadly. So I'm just going to read out explanation 5. It says, for the removal of doubts, it's hereby clarified that the royalty includes and has always included consideration in respect of any right, property or information, whether or not the possession or control of such right, property or information is with the payer, such right, property or information is used directly by the payer, or the location of such right, property or information is in India. Now, if we had to apply explanation 5.4 and give it a very broad meaning, then I think we will have to classify payments for all tangible products or most of tangible products also as royalty. So personally, I have a very strong view that the interpretation has to be that it has to be under, if the consideration is for the underlying technology or rights, then it could qualify as royalty. But if it's for the outcome of that, then it will not be a royalty. This is just to tell you the impact if we give a very broad meaning to the phrase in respect of or for a right. It can result in absurd outcomes. So if you download a PlayStation software directly online from a non-resident, I understand most of these people have created Indian distributors, but technically, even as an individual under section 195, if the non-resident is liable to or chargeable to tax then you're supposed to be deducting tax. So most of us who love playing games online or downloading stuffs online, and if we are making payments to non-residents, and if we take this very broad meaning to in respect of a right, in respect of or for the phrase right, then we would have to be deducting TDS on this. I'll just pause here to see if the audience has any differing views or any questions on this.
Guys, you can raise your hands and maybe I can allow you to speak, or you can type your points on the Q&A box.
So moving on, we'll now discuss how the decision could impact models such as software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. So before we go down into applying the legal principles, I thought that it will be highly relevant to understand the business construct of these technologies. So if you look at it, if we typically any software as a service would entitle the user to applications, data, runtime, middleware, virtualization, server, storage, networking. Now, when it comes to software as a service, all the ones which are colored in green is provided by the service provider. And as we move to the other models where we say it's platform as a service, then the provider provides, other than the application and the data, everything else is provided by the platform service provider. And similarly, when you come to infrastructure, other than the application data and some of the runtime softwares or computing technologies which are required, everything else is provided by the infrastructure service provider. Now, just to give you a few examples, for infrastructure as a service, you have Azure or AWS, which provide you hosting services. In terms of platform as a service, you have computing technologies. A lot of these technologies are also available by AWS or by Azure. And then when it comes to software as a service, we talk about utility tools such as Dropbox, Office 365, etc. Now, when we look at this context and we say that, okay, what are we paying for? So actually, when you look at a software as a service provider, he's also investing in creating an hardware infrastructure on which the software is running. And the consideration which is being paid is not merely for the software. So if you look at the business construct, though the terminology used is software as a service, what that service cannot be enjoyed by the end user if the underlying hardwares are not available. So in a literal sense, the software as a service has a higher element of hardware, which is why the question comes in that are we really making a payment for software to start with? So even under the even before the Supreme Court's decision, I believe there are very strong arguments to say that software as a service is not a consideration paid for the right to use the computer software itself. And if we take the meaning that in respect of the computer software has to be given a very broad meaning, and we have to ignore the components of economics of the hardware, then again it comes back to that absurd situations where mobile phones or any electronic item or any Wi-Fi enabled item, if you're paying for that also, would qualify as a royalty. There is a common doubt when I make these statements to say that, is that so because if we are using it for personal purposes? Yes, under the domestic law, when you're using it for personal use, you don't have the risk of the TDS. But if you're using anything where the payments are going to a non-resident, legally you are liable to deduct tax on those payments to the non-resident. This is just to give a flavor of when you go into the end user license agreements, which different SaaS providers also provide. I mean, they typically call it as terms of service, but most of them will have paragraphs which talk about that you have a license to use the software in a broad sense. And this is again not license in the context of Section 30 of the Copyright Act. So access to cloud products would mean that yes, the cloud products, so there will be different forms of SaaS solutions which you may get. Like for example, if you're using Google Drive, you are using a software as a service, but the service there is of storage. So you're storing your content in Google Drive, right? And then if you're using the versioning control, etc., using features which that service provides. And most of these services or software as a service models enable an offline play for you to be able to download apps and work offline. So you have different formats which are emerging even in the context of SaaS business models. So you could have pure web-based software as a service. For example, you upload a certain content on the internet for translation, and you get just the output, which is the translated output. You could have scenarios where the web applications provide for an offline app. So for example, you have a Google Drive where you store the content, and when you connect to the internet, that content is automatically replicated online. Then you could have formats where the entire service which you're enjoying could actually be enjoyed by downloading an application. But in all of these scenarios, the access is only for the authorized use for the feature or the outcome which the supplier is promising. And the license is non-exclusive, non-sublicensable, and non-transferable. Moreover, there are explicit restrictive terms that there'll be no reproduction or modification of any kind which is permitted. This is another example. This is more, I think, from AWS, where platform as a service could be visualized. So typically computing technologies are available. So people who are building applications, especially with the changing worlds of machine learning and AI, etc., there are computing technologies which AWS as a platform provides the businesses to use, like the Elasticsearch, etc. So what happens in those scenarios? Those services are something which the product is enjoying. So typically, let's say if I had to build a search product, I could create an interface. I could host it on AWS, connect that product to the Elasticsearch, which is provided by AWS, and I could give that interface to the to my customers as part of my website, etc. So what happens in that is the indexing mining of content is actually being enabled by the services which AWS has provided. So again, does that mean that I have a right in the copyright of an Elasticsearch technology? No. And that's it's the same principle that what we are making a payment for is enjoying the platform service and therefore not qualifying as royalty. So just to summarize some of these viewpoints, the software primarily resides on the cloud and is accessed by the user for a stated purpose, whether it's a project management tool, a workflow tool. You could integrate those workflow tools with other products. One more example to provide to you that, downloading of apps does not result in obtaining a license to use. So I'm not sure how many of us here have experimented, but a lot of the online platforms like Microsoft Teams also permits people to create apps which function on those platforms. Now they provide those apps. You can pay for it and apply that app on top of Microsoft Teams. So technically speaking, you have a license to use the features of Microsoft Teams. You're making an additional payment to use an app which is compatible with Microsoft Teams, and the legal terms in any of these downloads will say that you have a right to use the software, but not reproduce, reverse engineer, or modify the same. Now, in these environments, the SaaS provider still retains full ownership of the software, and you really have no right to do any kind of a modification. So a lot of times, especially in the Office 365 environments, you have a lot of permutations, combinations of combining different applications and creating some kind of a framework for the recipient. So you're using multiple softwares in that sense and combining it. That doesn't mean that you're customizing any code or you have a right to customize any code. So I'm just re-emphasizing the same principles, that what will qualify as a royalty is a payment which is for the copyright and not for the copyrighted article. In addition to this, yes, there is a common sort of perception that if it's software as a service, the phrase service is sort of presumed in that model, and therefore people conclude that therefore it cannot qualify as a royalty. Would like to just caution you that in most of the emerging SaaS platforms, there are underlying sort of applications or apps which are provided to the user, which are required to enjoy the service which is being provided by the SaaS provider. And therefore, their terms of service will explicitly state that you have a right to use that application in order to enjoy that service. So now whether the consideration is for you actually getting the right to use the application, is it for the right to use the service which that SaaS provider has done, because you have tried to so let's say simplest example I can think about is a chat on Zoom or Teams Meet. I mean, what the conversation we are doing right now is Chamber of Tax Consultants paying Zoom for what? Are they paying them because they have access to be able to enable a presenter to host a certain screen? That's also using a technology, right? So I think it's with the increasingly digitized environment, we need to understand that from a business perspective, the consideration is really for the outcome or the feature which the platform is, or the platform or the software is providing, and not for the underlying technology. Now, let me try and give you an example where it could qualify as a royalty. So, for example, if there are technologies which are, let's say, you need to make an Android application. Now, there is a part of Android which could be provided in the open source world, and there's a part of that code which works on a license. Now, if you are contracting with a creator who has created a certain code in the Android environment, you're taking that code, you're modifying that code, and you're taking complete ownership to monetize that going forward, then the payment which you're making to the first owner will qualify as a royalty, because there he is permitting you to use the copyright which was originally created in his or in his name or in his entity's name. Hope that was that's a useful perspective. Happy to get into a conversation for any questions on this. So either I've been explicitly clear or I'm not sure. Okay, so just to move on. Now let's look at platform as a service. Like I mentioned earlier, its platform as a service basically provides you with an enhanced access to computing technologies, which are also in the nature of software. The difference there probably is that because those computing technologies need that kind of a server power, it has to reside in clouds and interact between multiple servers hosted in the cloud. So that is the real difference there. But finally, even if you're making a payment for a platform as a service, the underlying benefit which you're getting is to use the benefits arising out of that computing technologies. And this is a highly emerging field, especially in the AI analytics space. So there are platforms which monetize themselves by saying that you could give me, terabytes of data, which I will mine on my platform and give you the output. Now, when it comes to infrastructure as a service, one of the common arguments which we come across is whether, when we are making a payment to host on AWS servers or Azure servers, is it a right to use the equipment? I think it's emerged very clearly, and even the legal terms are very explicit, that the end user does not have any right over the equipment, has no control. He cannot use the equipment. He benefits from the hosting services for a certain charge. So it's really in the control of Amazon or Azure to actually see where the server is residing, how they are upgrading the servers, etc. They are commercializing it by allowing the user to have a protected environment within their overall equipments. Having said this, like I mentioned in the early part of the discussion, that the mischief of explanation 4, 5, and 6, if that is read into any of these scenarios, then you would have to conclude that these are all royalties, because explanation 5 mentions right, property, or information. So equipments are properties. The possession or control of such property need not be with the payer. The property need not, be used directly by the payer. So if we give it this kind of a broad-based meaning of explanation 5 in the context of explanation 2, then all these transactions will qualify as royalty. But like I mentioned, that in my view, if such broad meanings are attributed, then I think in the world we are in today, majority of the transactions which the business world is entering into, in especially the digital world, would qualify as royalty. And I guess it makes sense to that extent to say that, yes, if they have introduced equalization levy and they are going to, tax the digital transactions through equalization levy, then at least from an overall economic tax base perspective, the respective countries are probably in a more appropriate direction as compared to taking some of these interpretations. Moving on. The next classical issue is about the database subscription. In Karnataka, this was a big challenge because of the High Court decision in Wipro Technologies, which relying on Samsung had held that database subscriptions are royalty. I think the first principle is that, again, when you subscribe to a database for information, you get a right in the information, or you're basically able to read the information and consume the information. And if it's not a payment for a right in the information, then it should not qualify as royalty. Moreover, this case law had significantly relied on the Samsung decision. And since that has been overruled, I guess access of database also now can be argued that it is not a royalty. Fully protected under the treaty, in my view, domestic law will continue to be highly litigated. The next open issue, which is there, is in the context of 194J. So whether domestic transactions where when a domestic buyer makes a payment to a domestic seller of softwares, whether it will qualify as royalty. One observation here is that section 194J defines royalty under explanation BA as defined under explanation 2 to section 916. So I think there is a fundamental interpretation challenge here, that whether the expansion provided through explanation 4 and 5 should be considered while interpreting explanation 2 in the context of section 194J. So this is one argument we could take to say that, the definition under 194J for royalty should be interpreted more restrictively as compared to how it is defined in the context of section 9. Prior to the Supreme Court decision to benefit the industry, the department had notified saying that the second stage of the transfer of such softwares will not require a TDS if the first level TDS has been applied. So when a foreign company sells a software to an Indian distributor, if the Indian distributor has deducted tax on it, then the subsequent or the next sale which the distributor does, in that transaction, the buyer need not deduct TDS. Now, the question is now, with the Supreme Court decision coming in the context of a cross-border transaction, most distributors or non-residents are going to insist that those payments, no TDS should be deducted thereon. The minute the TDS is not deducted on the first level, will the authorities argue that automatically TDS should have been deducted on the second part of it? I guess the view which I carry here is that if fundamentally we are saying that these payments for shrink-wrap softwares are not royalty, then the TDS obligation under the section itself does not trigger, and the notification cannot indirectly impose any obligations in this context. Bharat, any questions so far?
So we have one question. You'll want to take that up now or later, maybe?
Yeah, I'll take it up now.
Yeah. I'll just read the question out. Should explanation 4 and 5 be applied to understand explanation 2, or is it with reference to 916? Can I read that out again, Vishnu?
Yes.
Should explanations 4 and 5 be applied to understand explanation 2, or is it with reference to 916?
Sure. So interesting. So I'm just going to read out 916 says income by way of royalty payable by the government or a person who is a resident or a person who is a non-resident. There are exception clauses or exclusion clauses which uses the word in respect of any right, property or information used or transactions outside India. So now at the stage of 916, the only thing meaning which we have is that income by way of royalty payable by so-and-so deems to accrue or arise in India. To understand the meaning of royalty, you enter explanation 2. So explanation 2 clearly says, for the purposes of this clause, royalty means. Okay, so it is an exhaustive definition in that context that it says it means consideration for the following. And it is in this explanation 2 that the phrase transfer of all or any rights has been used. So in my view, I'm not able to visualize how explanation 4 and 5 can be directly understood by going to 916 and not referring to explanation 2. So the person who's raised this query, if they want to elaborate, more than happy. I think it's an interesting perspective share. So I'll move on. I'm assuming that I have convinced the person, but happy to take it offline also if they would like to drop me an email. Because I believe that explanation 4-5 read with the memorandum when this was introduced necessarily has to be read in the context of explanation 2, because that's where the definition of royalty is provided. And one more observation on that is that explanation 4 and 5 basically say for the removal of doubts, it is clarified in explanation 4, they use the word the transfer of all or any rights in respect of. The phrase transfer of all or any rights is provided only in explanation 2. Similarly, in explanation 5, it says for the removal of doubts, it's hereby clarified that the royalty includes and has always included consideration in respect of any right, property or information. Now, this is what I said, explanation 5, very technically speaking, could be looked at as a standalone clause. But if we give it that kind of a broad meaning, then the conclusion is quite absurd. And therefore, I would continue to hold the view that the phrase right, property or information has to be understood in the context of explanation 2. On this, I'd like to highlight one point which I think I missed earlier in the session, that in the Supreme Court's arguments, the tax on behalf of the taxpayer, one argument which was mentioned was that explanation 4 does not expand the meaning of explanation 2. And the Supreme Court in passing reference merely said that they don't agree with that view, while they, and it just basically went on to say that explanation 4 came in only in 2012, so TDS obligations cannot consider explanation 4 for prior to 2012. But if you look at the discussion of the Supreme Court, it goes on emphasizing that any of these consideration payments have to be understood in the context of the copyright and not give it a broader sense. Now, if we have to go by and say that explanation 4 and 5 have to be understood without drawing a nexus to the right, then really with explanation 5, the all the possible scenarios, because right, property or information, one of these three at least, if not all, necessarily resides in all elements of a business transaction. Whether you're purchasing a machine, right, there is a property. And besides that, the machine got manufactured or built in a factory. That factory used a process. In order to deploy the process, they used a certain information. Now, if I look at explanation 5, it says that the possession or control of such property or right need not be with the payer. Such right or property need not be used directly by the payer. So yes, then my consideration has components which are going towards any of these elements. So I don't think that the intent of the legislature was to give such a broad meaning. I think it's just a drafting. The drafting is not as good as we would like it. But I think the intent has always been that the payment for computer software was probably intended to be covered, And then when it came to the transactions involve satellite links, etc., they wanted to cover those transactions. Yeah, and I also believe that now with the way digitization has happened, if the legislature had to look at these explanations, they themselves would probably relook at them.
Okay, so Vishnu here, Vinay here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was my question. So actually this, if you're going to look at this particular situation, it is like there is an explanation to an explanation if you're going to go in that particular sense here.
Yes.
So I was under the impression that explanation 4, we only have to read it for that exclusions purpose, which is there in 916 clause B, I suppose, where they say that for the resident paying it, what is not included. In that context of right property information, probably they were trying to elaborate and just say that computer software comes in it. So, but you are saying that we will have to read explanation 4 and 5 into explanation 2 also.
Absolutely, Vinay. So let's try and just look at it if we had to interpose this explanation 4 in the context of the exclusion clause. So it says income by way of royalty payable by a person who is resident, except where the royalty is payable in respect of any right, property, or information used or services utilized for the purpose of business carried on by such person outside India. So now if I interpose the meaning that, let's assume for a moment that this is a computer software which is utilized outside India. So are we saying that it's excluding computer softwares utilized outside India? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, but no, they're saying that the in explanation 4, they're bringing computer software to the scope of right property or information. It comes under that whenever there is any transfer of rights, property, or information, it is computer software is included in it. So that when the terminology of right property or information is only in 916B, then I think is there a necessity to read it to explanation 2 is what I was just having a doubt. That's all.
Sure.
So
Yeah, no, I would think that it serves no purpose. If you look at the memorandum when they introduced it also, because anyway, even if it's assuming for a moment this was intended for the exclusion phrase, anyway, then it is not royalty. It's not chargeable to tax. Right. So I would continue to hold the view that it the relevance of explanation 4 and 5 is in the context of explanation 2 and 6.
Okay. Are there any, is this one of the only unique situations where there are explanations to explanation sort of a situation? Is it? Usually I thought explanation is only for the main provision. That's all. That is why I was just having this doubt.
Yeah. No, this is, I'm not sure if it's unique or not, but section 9 is filled with these ambiguities.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Right. So moving on, just wanted to touch, in this session, we are not going to go deep into equalization levy, but wanted to highlight that now, like, especially if you look at it, most of the positions of my views after the Supreme Court decision has been that these transactions would not qualify as royalty. So there is a very high risk in that scenario of, not risk, in most of those scenarios, there's a good probability of equalization levy 2.0, which was introduced in the Finance Act 2020 to trigger. So a very quick thing, consideration received or receivable by a non-resident e-commerce operator for supply of services, including provision or facilitation of goods or services. And it goes on. So, but I think the more important emphasis I wanted to bring on is that the way EL 2.0 has been drafted, it says that if the consideration is taxable as royalty, then EL 2.0 is not applicable. Now, therefore, software transactions are likely to be covered under EL 2.0 post the Supreme Court's decision. Now, here we need to look at the attribute that most non-residents are likely to take the treaty benefit, and therefore, until the law is amended, the Supreme Court decision will be the law of the land. So I think to that extent, non-residents would take the view that this is not royalty. Now, the question comes in that, if because it is not royalty, equalization levy triggers. So the first challenge which happens is what is happening right now between the US and India in terms of EL 2.0 being challenged internationally as an unfair imposition. Then there is a question of the dispute on the nature of payments by tax officers. So it is extremely important that Indian vendors obtain the tax residency certificates and declarations from the non-residents of the non-PE and to some extent the nature of the transaction itself to ensure that they are fully protected, because otherwise you may have a scenario where EL 2.0 has been paid by the non-resident and the Indian resident payer is basically caught by the officer to say that you have not deducted tax and would expect the payer to deduct the tax and trigger a proceeding on the payer. So this is a very important emphasis I want to lay, that I do believe that in cross-border transactions, with in most of the treaties, with the Supreme Court's decision, the standard software shrink wrap kind of transactions will not be royalty, and therefore EL 2.0 will apply. But we need to be ensuring that we have the tax residency certificates and the declarations from the non-residents. A broad overview about how the regime exists today. If it is a royalty or an FTS as per the double tax avoidance agreement, there's a gross basis of taxation. If it is not royalty, then we need to check whether it's business profits liable to tax in India because of a PE. If there is no PE, then you have to check whether EL 1.0 applies. And if that does not apply, then you come to EL 2.0, right? In most digital transactions of sizable amounts, it's very unlikely that they're going to escape this tax net. Where treaties are not present, you also have an additional layer to check, which is in the context of the significant economic presence. So SEP tests also have to be performed before we say that that transaction is not taxable in India. So at this stage, wanted to spend the next 10-15 minutes just sharing my sort of perspective on ground, what the Supreme Court decision means for all of us, and what kind of pragmatic positions are possible and where we need to review it a little further. So the first thing I think from the Supreme Court decision, the emphasis is that the business understanding and appreciating the transaction is something which finally the Supreme Court acknowledges. So while we approach the High Court and the Supreme Court on questions of law, it's quite visible that in most of these decisions of the Supreme Court in the cross-border environment, the understanding of the facts has been laid emphasis on by the Supreme Court. And this is where I think the first part which we as tax practitioners or decision makers need to keep in mind, that how have we articulated the transaction in our intercompany agreements, or when the customers are providing us terms of service, what is the language which is being used there, and is it very clearly understood that there are no rights of reproduction which are being provided to the payer. So this is probably the first do's or the checkpoints which I would want to keep in mind. The second part comes to the relevance of agreements. This is more relevant practically in scenarios where small and medium enterprises use the services of very large platforms. And those large platforms have terms of service which are defined in a certain way. For example, it's quite an interesting read. Like if you went on and looked at what's the terms of services of Google's cloud services versus Google's AdSense program versus the terms of service when you're using the search engine of Google versus when you're looking at the Google Drive. So the way they define it for each of those offerings have its own, sort of flavors. And in most of those cases, they being a large enterprise, their focus is on protecting themselves. And therefore they have a fair degree of restrictions, which typically, you'll see in contracts which are licensed in nature. Now, when you look at those, it will say you cannot, you have access to do only this. The content is yours, but anything to do with the technology is mine. You're only going to use it for the stated purpose. These are the kind of flavors you'll see in the terms of service. And it is very easy at times to say that really, what this is a license to use, and therefore it is a royalty. But I would strongly urge that we need to, even assuming for a moment that a broad meaning has to be given to software, in at least the software as a service context, we need to understand that the consideration is not merely to use the software, but is to use the entire facility. And in that context, the actual conduct or substance principle can be relied upon by the taxpayers. Then in terms of using the Supreme Court decision to apply the law, the 8 principles which I sort of summarized the case law with are highly relevant. And the most important thing is referring to allied laws. It would be very interesting to see the impact of the privacy laws and the Information Act and the data privacy and data protection laws, etc., which are emerging. Because now, for example, just to give an example, now the regulators in the context of at least foreign payments to the banks and RBI's regulation says that all the data and the information has to reside in a server situated in India. So if you look at business models now, you have a data and an information angle, which is now going to be residing on a tangible server residing in India, could be one argument, or a cloud server which is being created, but it's within the Indian territory. Now, the question here is that if a foreign supplier is going to transact with Indian businesses, his data or information is going to be stored on this cloud server, which is within the Indian territory. So how are we going to interpret that scenario and say that, okay, my consideration to the foreign supplier is for some information which is residing in India, not in India? Are they even relevant parameters? I think a lot of this gets cleared out when we look at the allied laws and look at the purpose of those transactions. So just like how in this decision, the Supreme Court has beautifully gone into the Copyright Act and explained each of those actions which are covered by the copyright and applied it in the context of a transaction involving a shrink wrap software, it would be imperative for us to look at allied laws in the new digital world. The next comment is that fact is that now last few cross-border decisions of the Supreme Court has clearly laid down the thing that OECD commentaries and the judicial decisions in other jurisdictions are also being referred to by the judiciary in order to understand the perspective on the transaction. At this stage, I'd like to briefly touch upon the fact that the UN Model Convention, in the UN model, there has been a very strong lobby of including payments for computer software in the definition of royalty. And there was an extensive deliberation, and there's a lot of literature on it as to there were a lot of views which were for introducing computer software in the definition of royalty. And there were also a lot of arguments to say that no, it cannot be royalty. Now, finally, the UN has agreed to just state as a comment in the commentary that there are a few countries who believe it is royalty. And they have also been not amending the definition in the Model Convention because they have introducing Article 12B, which is really directed towards taxation of digital transactions. So this is an international development which could influence the effective tax cost as we go forward. But for the session objective from the Supreme Court's decision, I think even internationally, people are going to appreciate this view which has been outlined by the Supreme Court. Finally, in terms of applying this decision, having given a view which says that, yes, I'm a big fan of the Supreme Court decision and the fact that even post 2012, I believe that there are very strong grounds to say that payments for typical software transactions or SaaS kind of transactions is not royalty. It would be important in commercial negotiations to factor the litigation risks. And this will be also one element which will continue to bother us or benefit practitioners at times. So while the Supreme Court did adjudicate finally, but yet in my view, there is no finality on these transactions. Authorities are going to continue applying this for post 2012 transactions, just the way the Karnataka High Court interpreted it in the context of Samsung. And I'm personally very confused whether the amendments which may come in this context, should we hope for them or we should fear from them? because if the intent is going to be like it was in 2012, then yeah, then I think the international community is not going to benefit by that amendment, because it practically in today's world may levy a tax on almost every transaction in the cross-border environment. Having said that, with equalization levy and Article 12B, maybe it's time for a new regime which should be around the corner. So this is what I had to share from my side. Maybe, I mean, we have quite some time now. We could, take the questions from the audience, and any contrary views most welcome from the audience. Anything which they would like to highlight here.
So we'll take the questions, and then maybe the participants can chip in or add or contradict, so to say. Vishnu,
Sure.
can you access the questions in the Q&A box?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you can
So-
just read it out and
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I'll do that. So it's the question is, software payment to non-resident would be taxable as per section 916. Doubt is because the Supreme Court ruling is clear from DTA view, but not really clear from Act view. So in case no DTA or no TRC, then only Act would apply. So yes, I think yes, if there is no DTA or no TRC, then the Act will apply. But I think the important point, which the view I'm taking, is that post the Supreme Court ruling, the interpretation of the phrase consideration for transfer of all or any rights, I think the Supreme Court has emphasized that that phrase has to be interpreted or attributable to the copyright. And it is in that context, I believe, that even for post 2012 transactions, the Supreme Court's ruling can be relied upon, and a view can be taken that these standard software payments should not be construed as a royalty. It will be litigative, but on interpretation, my view is that we have very strong grounds to say that even post 2012, these transactions would not be royalty under the domestic law. There's just one question.
Vishnu, in the chat box, there are 3 questions. If you can just open the chat box.
Sure.
Can you access that?
Yes, 1 second.
Yeah. So if the software is being sold amongst group companies using internal ERP platform, trigger this.
I'll probably take it one. Yeah, if the software are being sold amongst group companies using internal ERP platform, trigger this equalization levy. If the software are being sold amongst group companies using internal ERP platform, will it trigger equalization levy? Sorry, I'm not able to visualize this question.
Vishnu, this is basically when group companies have a common ERP platform. There are these cross charges which are made, right, from the parent company to the group companies based on an allocation methodology, and we call that
Right.
SAP charges or something like that. So I think
Right.
the question is whether this will trigger an equalization levy or a royalty.
Yeah. For the definition which has been provided under the equalization levy, this risk exists, but I'm very sure that that was never the intent of equalization levy. It's surely not royalty in my mind, because again, I mean, whether it is a group company which is cross-charging it, it's finally towards the right to use a copyrighted article. So to that extent, my view there would be that the equalization levy risk is there, but surely not royalty. The next thing is, how do we check if SCP test is not fulfilled? Would a representation be sufficient? Yes, I think we do not have a, I mean, obviously there are these thresholds which have been prescribed for the SCP test. So yes, I think a representation would be sufficient. But litigation is not ruled out. Sorry, I'm not giving a clear view on, I mean, not giving you certainty on that, but that's the way the environment is. So I don't think any non-resident supplier will share too many details of his business with us. So to that extent, relying on a mere representation and maybe some basic checks should suffice. If the software are being sold amongst group companies using internal ERP trigger this equal, yeah, that we have discussed. Explanation for explanation we've discussed. Okay, but should we read Copyright Act when we are solely looking at domestic law as computer software is defined in explanation 3? Yes, Vinay, my view is that you have to read the Copyright Act because explanation 3 surely defines computer software. But what we are looking for something to qualify as royalty is whether the consideration is for the transfer of all or any rights. And I think in order to appreciate the meaning of transfer of all or any rights in respect of a patent or in respect of a literary work or in respect of a copyright in a literary work, you have to go back to the Copyright Act or the intellectual property laws to understand the meaning. Having said that, like I shown in one of the slides, there are a few words here which may not necessarily have been defined in the intellectual property laws. Like for example, the phrase invention. There is no right as such, you patent processes, etc. But in the Indian IPR context, my understanding is the invention as such is not spelled out as a protectable activity. So in that case, I yet continue to believe that we have to interpret to say that did I get a right in the invention, which means I have the entire know-how of the invention and I can use it as an owner, right? Because I can reproduce it, I can reverse engineer it, right? And therefore most of these transactions, if the transaction is for accessing that kind of a know-how, then it is royalty. But the standard facility kind of transactions cannot be covered under invention. Is explanation 4 expanding the scope in any way? In the interpretation of the tax authorities and the intent of the legislature, it's meant to expand the scope. So to that extent, that's how, if you read the memorandum, they clearly say that there was ambiguity or lack of certainty on whether computer software is royalty, and therefore they've introduced explanation 4. But if I now look at Supreme Court's decision and read it in that context, it's surely an expansion of the scope. And that's where I'm saying that from an interpretation perspective, where do you draw that line in respect of when you're expanding the meaning? At what stage will you say, no, these kind of transactions are considerations towards computer software and therefore royalty, but beyond this, it is not royalty because the software is residing in a tangible medium. Now, for example, a lot of the emerging models, you have hardwares which are supplied, and really what you keep making payments are for maintenance or upgrades of softwares, right? So then is the first leg of the transaction which we paid for, is that a royalty or not? Because what's happening as a business model is, yes, you need to access this equipment and then I'll keep giving you continuous upgrades of software. So are you making a payment for hardware? Are you making a payment for software? What component of that is for hardware? These are all challenges which will keep coming out. I think with the digitization world, it will just augur well if the legislature, clarifies this. I'm sure the assessing officers are going to give us a good time.
Mr. I think those are the questions we had. So I think we can conclude it here. Thank you so much, Vishnu. It was
Thank you.
a very good brainstorm.